Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks for uh, being interested in the touring scheme and looking to get some more information. I'm Aideen McCole. I'm the head of multidisciplinary arts. I'm joined by my colleague Muireann Walsh, who's the multidisciplinary arts officer. We manage the touring scheme as well as a number of other schemes. We are going to go through, just to state, first of all, this session is being recorded, or at least the info part of the session where Muireann and I do the talking is recorded so that folks who can't join us today can still catch up. If you go to the next slide, Muireann, we also want to draw your attention to the fact that here on Zoom, if you want or need to, you can click the button, the show captions button at the bottom of the Zoom window if you wish to have automatically generated captions. Um, we're going to go through lots of information about the Touring of Work scheme. There are two rounds of the scheme open at once, which are very similar, but with a couple of key differences. We'll go through the objectives and priorities of the scheme, who can apply and who can't, budgets, costs, guidelines, the application and assessment process, key dates and deadlines. We will go through some FAQs, and we'll reiterate our contact details. And then we'll stop the recording and we'll open the session up to questions. We ask that you use the Q&A box to type in your questions. In some cases, we will type responses, but we will talk through an awful lot of the questions. We'll use those questions to update the FAQs on the touring page on the Arts Council website. And just to state that if any of your questions are absolute doozies and we can't answer them in the session, if it's something that we need to check with colleagues or figure out, we would ask that we'll state this when any of those questions come in, but we would ask that you follow up with us so that when we go seeking the answer to your question, we can get back to you as well as include it in the FAQs on the website. So yeah, we'll talk a lot. We'll go through slides. We'll give you the key information about the scheme. Then we will do your questions. And just to state that Muireann and I are here until about 12:30 or maybe a little later because we started a little later so that we can get through as many of your questions as possible because we want to make sure that you are armed and equipped if you're going to submit an application to us. All right, we'll get started. So just to state that we work at the Arts Council. The Arts Council is the government agency for developing the arts. We are best known for funding, and indeed funding is what we do the most of. It gets the most time of our time and energy, and the vast majority of our budget goes towards funding artists, organisations and those who are engaged in the arts. We also offer advice to government and others. We research the arts and conditions for artists and the context in which the arts happen. And we promote the arts through initiatives, projects, communications campaigns, and so on, so that more people around Ireland get to participate in and enjoy the arts. The Touring of Work scheme is managed by the multidisciplinary arts team. That's me and Muireann. We are a team, we're quite a new team in the Arts Council. We look after a number of the cross art form grant schemes, the stuff like touring or creative production supports, the stuff that kind of sits between and across different art forms. We are also tasked with figuring out what we mean when we say multidisciplinary arts and how the Arts Council is going to support that really exciting and cool area of practice. And we will have a new multidisciplinary arts policy statement published early in the new year, which kind of sets out some guiding principles for the Arts Council's support of multidisciplinary arts and interdisciplinary arts. So if that's an area of practice you're interested in, keep an eye out for that. And if that's the way that you work, you'll be working more and more with Muireann and I. But today we're here to talk about touring. So the Touring of Work scheme aims to support artists and organisations to tour brilliant art of all kinds to different venues across the Republic of Ireland. The point is when great art gets made, that it gets shared with lots of audiences of lots of kinds in lots of places. And the touring of work scheme is designed to enable and support that. The touring scheme is open to any and all of the art forms and areas that are funded by the Arts Council, everything from architecture to young people and everything in between. There is no limit on what you can ask for. So if yours is a super light touch tour that only needs a small amount of money, you are welcome to apply. If yours is a big, meaty piece of work with tons of moving parts, that you're also very welcome to apply. Two rounds of the scheme are occurring simultaneously and have just opened and will both close in January. One is 2025 round two, which is an opportunity to tour work in the latter half of 2025. And the other is called 2026 advanced planning. That is an opportunity to fund work at any point in 2026. If you have not applied to touring before, you don't need to worry very much about this. But for those who have applied to the touring scheme in the past, we'd just like you to note that there are a few small changes. Just so you're aware and you're kind of braced for a few slightly different aspects to your application. One is that this time around the scheme is stranded, so that you will not plan your tour any differently. You do not approach your budget any differently than you would. But once you have determined what your tour is and how much it's going to cost, you will indicate in your application form which bracket it sits in. So we will ask that you indicate whether you're asking for an award of €50,000 or less, strand one. If you're asking for an award of 50 to €150,000, that's strand two. Or if you're asking for a tour in excess or an award of in excess of 150 grand. You tick a box accordingly. That's the only change. We no longer require a contingency plan as a mandatory document. So those who have applied to touring before know that we do ask for a number of mandatory documents along with your application form. Contingency plan is no longer one of those. We have brought some clarity to the difference between personal and participant and audience access costs, and we'll talk a little bit about that down the line. We have added a little bit more detail to the MOU template. So the MOU template you use to firm up and spell out the relationships you have with partner venues or the places where your tour goes. You will indicate your agreed target audience. You will indicate your financial agreement with that venue. You will also now indicate if there is any in-kind support involved in the partnership in that template. You will indicate a date by which you and your partner will agree, change, amend your agreement. So in other words, if you are funded, when you are funded, you have a date by which time you will return to your venues and say, yes, we're on board, we're doing it the same way we originally planned. Are we changing anything? Or if you are unsuccessful, you should go back to those venues at that date and let them know that the tour isn't going ahead, or you need to radically change how you're going to approach things. To be clear, that's not something we are chasing you for or need to see. It's just something that we think is helpful for you in terms of that management, the management of those relationships with venues, just to have a point by which you firm things up. And then we've also changed the way in which you present your budget. There is an exception if you're touring theatre or opera. The theatre team has a specific budget template they wish for you to use. And the opera team have a specific template which they want you to use. Anyone else uses a new general touring template, which we hope is helpful in terms of ensuring you're thinking about all of the right things when putting together a touring budget. But we hope it's also flexible so that those of you who work in certain ways include certain things, you can take certain things out. But we'd love feedback on that because it's new. So at the end of the scheme, if you want to drop us a line and tell us that was great, that was awful, we would like something different, please do. So those are the changes that that you need to be aware of for this time round. What is the point of the touring scheme? The objective of the scheme, like I've said, is to make great art of all kinds available to more people throughout the country. When selecting tours to fund, we consider how brilliant the work is itself, but also how you are considering public engagement, how you are reaching and engaging audiences with the work you want to bring on the road. In many cases, the work to be toured will have already been produced and well received by audiences and critics. Now, there are exceptions to that for certain art forms, but generally speaking, it is about getting work that we know to be brilliant in front of more people. Successful applicants will also show how their tour will create or make use of a network of venues and other partners and collaborators. These might include other artists, producers, promoters, arts organisations, festivals, local authorities, and funders. Your partners and collaborators should contribute to the success of your tour in artistic, audience, and geographic and spatial terms. So, in other words, it's not just about you and your brilliant work, it's about who you're working with, where you're taking this tour, and how you are ensuring it reaches the audiences it should in order to do that thing of getting really great art in front of lots of people in lots of places. So consideration of those sorts of things, where you bring the work, who you work with to get it there, and how you work to get it in front of audiences, those are really, really key in a scheme like this. Like everything in the Arts Council, the touring scheme kind of speaks to and takes consideration of a number of our policies and strategies, all of which are listed there. They're also listed in the guidelines and they're linked on our website. So if you want to do a deep dive into our spatial policy and how we are considering getting art happening and engaged all over the country, have a look at that. If you're interested in paying the artist, take a deep dive there. Bear in mind things like EDI and so on, and all of that material is available on our website for you to take consideration of. Okay, the nuts and bolts of the scheme. The scheme is now open for individuals and organisations to tour work when it comes to round two for the latter half of 2025. You should be based in the Republic of Ireland. If you're not, you need to be really convincing in your application about how you bringing your work on tour around Ireland benefits the arts in the Republic of Ireland. You should be a professional practicing artist or arts worker or arts organisation. If you are in receipt of Arts Council funding already, you do need to make it very clear that the tour you're applying for is in addition to what you're already being funded to do. Note that if we're talking about round two, 2025, organisations who are strategically funded, art centres or partnership funding recipients cannot be the lead applicant. They absolutely can be your partners, but they shouldn't be the lead applicant. So like I said, who cannot apply? Those organisations in receipt of those types of funding from the Arts Council. If you do not have a demonstrable track record as a professional artist or arts organisation, if you are not guaranteeing payment of artists or payment to artists, or if you are a national cultural institution, you cannot apply to touring round two. 2026 advanced planning. It's all very, very similar. The key difference, other than it's a tour in 2025 versus it's a tour in 2026, the key difference is that strategically funded organisations, art centres, and those in receipt of partnership funding can apply to this one. So organisations such as these can apply for tours well in advance. It's the stuff that comes around a little sooner that they cannot apply to. And then this just reiterates that. So again, in 2026 for advanced planning, if you do not have a demonstrable track record, if you are not based in the Republic of Ireland, unless you're making that really strong case about the benefit of the arts, benefit of your work to the arts in Ireland, if you're not guaranteeing payment to artists, or if you're a national cultural institution, you cannot apply to advanced planning. Timing, 2025 round two, it's for tours in the latter half of 2025, so July 2025 onwards. Advanced planning can be for a tour occurring at any point in 2026. Like I said, no upper limit. And you will indicate, once you have figured out your budget and you know what you want to ask us for, you indicate which bracket that ask is in. 50 grand or under, between 50 and 150 grand, or above 150 grand. What kinds of things can you include in your touring budget? Any of the direct costs involved in the tour, wages and fees for artistic staff, creative staff, technical staff, and anyone else, administrative costs that relate to the tour, hire of equipment, space, venue, if that is what you need in order to make the tour happen, marketing, PR, and public engagement costs. And do think carefully about these from the perspective that this is about making sure great work gets to audiences, reaches audiences. Maybe it's enormous audiences, maybe it's very targeted audiences, but you do need to be thinking about that. You can ask us for the costs of accommodation, daily expenses, and travel. You can ask for personal or participant disability access costs, and these will actually come from another, if funded, they actually come from another budget within the Arts Council. You should also think about your audience access costs. Do you need to put things in place in order for audience members of different kinds to be able to engage and enjoy the work? And then in those cases where you are taking something that has already been made and bringing it on the road, anything that involves getting it up and running again, getting it remounted, um, those can be included in your ask here. So in the case of the performing arts, theatre, opera, dance, circus, street performance and spectacle, the priority is that the work has already been made and has already been enjoyed, and you can tell us and show us how it has already been enjoyed. That's what gets prioritized. That's what those areas of the Arts Council really want to see. But for other areas such as traditional arts, visual arts, multidisciplinary arts, music, those areas are open to you creating something new and bringing it on the road. And the creation of something new can be included the in the ask here. In the case of the performing arts, they do really like to see you propose work that has already been made and well received. They do state that in exceptional circumstances, you can come to them with something new, but you need to check that with them first. So for instance, if you are a theatre maker, you need to go to the theatre team and say, hi, I want to do something brand new. What do you reckon? And you'll need sign off from them before you send an application in, mainly so that you don't end up using up a whole lot of time and energy for something that would not be considered eligible. So check with them first if that is something you wish to do. So access costs. In the Arts Council, we distinguish between the access costs that would be required to ensure that artists and participants can contribute to the making of the work, and the costs relating to ensuring an audience can enjoy the work. You should show them separately you should consider both of them. And if you need to include either or both, you show them separately in your budget. And that is because when it comes to what we call personal or participant access costs, the costs to ensure that artists and participants can help you make the work and have what they need in order to do so, those costs will come from a different budget. So we need to be able to see clearly which those are. So that's a little bit more information on that and some examples of what a personal or participant disability access cost might be, and what a cost or what an audience disability access cost might be. What can you not apply for? If the tour will already commence before July 2025, in the case of round 2 2025, or if the tour is going to commence before 2026, in the case of advanced planning, you can't apply for it. Initial production costs, unless it's the case that you are coming from one of those areas where you can bring something new on tour. You cannot apply for costs to tour internationally. Take a look at Culture Ireland for that. You cannot apply for costs directly related to touring in Northern Ireland. Take a look at Arts Council Northern Ireland for that. No major capital purchases. Ongoing core costs that are not directly related to the tour, or activities or costs that do not fit the purpose of the scheme. If it's more suited to another award from ourselves or someone else, if it relates to fundraising, if it relates to competition, if it relates to profit making, or anything that is already funded, I'm afraid you can't come to us for it. Okay, into the guidelines.
Great. I'm just going to run through the guidelines, which will be a really important point of reference for applicants. No matter who you are, these guidelines should be read and consulted carefully before you submit an application. So where you can find these is on the Arts Council website. It's under the funding drop down. You can go through to available funding. And again, this is all available in the Irish language, if you would prefer to apply through Irish as well. Once you're on the available funding webpage, you will see two boxes. One is for the Touring of Work Scheme Round 2, and the other is for the Touring of Work Scheme Advanced Planning. So make sure you're clicking into the right one depending on which tour period you are hoping to apply for. So you can click on those green boxes accepting applications, because we are now open for submissions. So this is what the Touring of Work Scheme Round 2 webpage looks like. I'm just showing this as an example. The Advanced Planning webpage looks very similar. So it has all of the information we've already gone through, such as the closing date, which is the 23rd of January, all of the artform and art practices you can apply under, and then our contact details. The guidelines are available for both advanced planning and round 2 to consult. This is a document, it's a PDF document that you'll be able to open. We have all of the supporting material templates that you will need to fill out as part of your application. For example, we've got the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU. We've got the budget templates for each art form as well. And you can apply now through the green button. Again, these are all available in Irish. So if you want to flick the webpage into Irish, we have the green outline here, and you can access all of the templates and guidelines through Irish as well. So this is the first page of the guidelines for round 2. Again, advanced planning looks very similar, but it will just go through each of the important aspects of your application and how you can fill those in to the best possible way. So section 1 will be all about the Touring of Work scheme. Again, as Aideen has run through already, all of the eligibility criteria, what you can apply for, who the applicant is. Section 2 will then go through how you make your application. So this is how you fill out the application form and all of the mandatory documents you will need to provide. Section 3 then is about how your application will be processed, and this is going into detail about the assessment process. And then finally, we have an appendix at the end, which will offer the individual art form and art practice priorities, which will be very important just to consult so you know what your individual art form or art practice area is looking for, what the teams are looking for. And I'll just move on to the next page. So I'm going to go through the application process now. One of the most important parts of this is that all applications will need to be submitted through our online services portal. Again, this can be accessed on the Arts Council website. So it's next to funding and Arts in Ireland. You'll click onto online services, log in to apply for funding, and this should be on the homepage of the Arts Council website. This will bring you to online services, and you can see the login page here. So as I've said, we can only accept applications through OLS. We will not accept applications submitted by post, fax, email, or delivered by hand. You will need to use a computer or laptop to submit your application. And just to note, our OLS portal does not work on phones or tablets, so it has to be on a laptop or computer. If you don't have an OLS account already, please sign up as soon as you can. It will take about 5 days to get set up, and you will be issued an artist reference number, so an ARN, and your password, which you will need again to apply. So if you have one already, you don't need to worry. Just make sure you remember your password for your OLS account. If you have any issues, any technical issues with your OLS account, you're better off going to the OLS team rather than me, as I will just forward on your query to OLS. So their email is onlineservices@artscouncil.ie, or you can call them on 01618 0200, or you can call them on 01618 0243. So again, this is the OLS sign up page or login page, depending on where you're at the moment in your application. So the application process, this is just a little breakdown of how you begin to sign in and fill out the application form. So the application form can be accessed through OLS, and it is filled out using either Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, depending on whether you're doing a budget or an application form, or on OpenOffice Writer or OpenOffice Calcon, and then it is uploaded through OLS. So you will log on through OLS using your ARN and your password. When you're on the home page, you will click Make an Application. When you get through to this screen, you will provide primary contact for this application and select Next. And you will come to the screen, one, making an application and choosing a funding program. And that will be for touring of work, either round 2 or advanced planning. You'll then input your reference, so it's a unique reference for your application, just something that you can identify it by. In section B, then you will click the buttons to download the guidance notes if you haven't already, and the application form. And just note that you can find more detailed information about this process in the guidelines from page 17 to 21. So I'd really recommend you go through those. It will highlight each of the different steps. So when it comes to filling out your application form, as I've said, it's through Word or it can be done through OpenOffice on your computer. Again, consulting the guidelines as you go along. Just to note, the application form is formatted in a certain way, so you need to type inside the grey boxes. If you don't do this or you delete them, your form won't upload properly. The application form is broken down into 4 main parts. You will fill out your general information. So this includes information like your name, your ARN, so we can identify you, the strand you're applying under, so in terms of your budget, and then the arts form and art practice area. So whether you're going under theatre, literature, that type of thing. Section 2 outlines your proposal. So you're going to give us your title, a summary of the application, what you intend to do, the venues you intend to tour to, and then any collaborators that are going to be involved, any artists or venues that will be involved in your application. Part 3, then, you will outline the amount you wish to request. So the proposed expenditure should include all fees and wages, technical costs, promotion and publicity costs, and any administrative costs. Proposed income should include what you expect to receive from other funders, such as box office receipts and program sales. It's important to reflect all in-kind support in both income and expenditure, so reflecting the true and full and true value of your proposal. And then on top of that, your participant or personal access costs are in addition to your final amount as well. So just to note that. And then part 4, you will just make sure you have all of your supporting documents, and we have a little checklist as well that you can fill out and make sure you have everything. So again, just to note the mandatory documents, a completed application form is a definite requirement. You will need to fill out a memorandum of understanding for each of your partner organizations. And again, the MOU is available on the touring webpage. Note that the MOUs aren't necessary or required for a theatre tour, but if you're any other art form, you will need to fill out an MOU. If you can, we'd really appreciate it if you could put the MOUs you can combine all of your MOUs in a PDF in one document. Again, you'll need one for each venue, but if you can put them all together, it makes it easier for our assessors to review them. You will need to provide a detailed budget. So just check that you have the correct budget template, whether you're a theatre tour, an opera tour, or any of the other art form or art practice areas, you will need to provide a template. You will need to provide a public engagement strategy. This can be maximum 3 pages. You will need to provide evidence of your track record as an artist or organization. So this will include CVs, biographies, or your company profile, and this is a maximum of 2 pages each. You will need to provide samples of work. So you can just check the guidelines, page 14 to 15, for the art form or art practice specifications. And in certain circumstances, you'll be required to submit further documents. So if you are applying for access costs, you will need to provide a short document outlining what these access costs are. If you're working with children or young people, please do fill in the Child Protection and Welfare Quality Assurance self-audit once you are successful in your application. If you're working with vulnerable persons, please make sure that the national policy and procedures on safeguarding vulnerable persons and risks at risk of abuse is you comply to this in your application, that you agree to apply to this. And then if you're working with animals, please provide evidence of an animal welfare protection policy and procedure. Just a little note, when you are filling these documents out and providing them to us, just prepare them in an acceptable file format. You can double check section 2.3 of the touring guidelines for more information on this. Make sure your files are clearly labeled, and review our checklist at the end of the application form, and as well at the appendix of the guidelines, which will just provide further clarification on what we are looking for. Upload the application form and all of your supporting materials, and please double check that you've uploaded the correct files. And we often get applicants emailing us afterwards saying they've uploaded the wrong files or they've labeled them incorrectly. So just double check that before you submit. And then the last step is you're going to submit your application on OLS. I'm now going to go through the assessment and decision process. So following your submission, the assessment process goes something like this. You will receive 2 emails, one to confirm that we've received your application and the second to provide your application number. This should begin with an A, the letter A, and be followed by about 5 or 6 letters after that. If you don't receive an application number by email, please contact online services. Once we've received your application, we will make sure it's eligible for the scheme. So we'll go through all the different eligibility criteria, whether you've filled out your application form, for example, you've fulfilled the priorities and objectives, and you've provided the correct mandatory documents. In some cases, maybe the art form or art practice area you've applied to isn't the best fit. You might have applied under theatre, but maybe you suit music a little bit better. We'll contact you if this happens, and we'll just double check that you'd be happy to move into this area and transfer. Applications are, if you're deemed eligible, then you'll be passed on to the internal joint assessment process. And this is when shortlisting happens. So our assessors and Arts Council staff will use their professional arts experience and expertise to assess your applications against the touring criteria. This will be based on artistic merit, public engagement, the strategic objectives and priorities of the touring of work scheme. Again, these are outlined in the guidelines, and feasibility. We will then shortlist or not shortlist, and those that are shortlisted will continue to panel. An external peer panel will review your shortlisted applications and materials. They will come together and determine a final score and assessment, and we will then provide the final decision. The purpose of the peer panel is to provide a diversity of expert views to inform the decision-making process. It normally consists of about 3 to 5 people, adjudicators, with relative art form or arts practice area experience. This meeting is usually led by Arts Council members acting as with a non-voting chair as well, and Arts Council advisors and staff attend as required. We will communicate decisions by April 2025 of whether you have been successful in your application. And then assessment reports are available to all applicants, no matter whether you are shortlisted or not shortlisted. So you can email us directly and request one, and just make sure you provide your application number and your AORN when you do so. So this is just a little breakdown. Again, you're going to receive your 2 emails. We'll move on to eligibility checks. We will move on to the joint assessment process internally. If you're successful, you will move on to the external peer process, and that will decide the final decisions, and you will receive a decision letter. And again, assessment reports are open to all applicants who've been shortlisted and not shortlisted. So we're coming to the end of the presentation, where I'm just going to go through some final information and advice you might need. Just general kind of common sense advice. We would just ask you allow for plenty of time in advance of the deadline in January. Please ensure you are registered on OLS if you are a first-time applicant and user. If you already have an account, just make sure you remember your login details. Again, you must apply through OLS. We won't accept applications submitted by post, fax, email, or delivered by hand. Always relate your proposal back to the award's priorities and objectives, and read the latest guidelines and pay attention to any musts or mandatory requirements. Be sure that you understand the eligibility criteria, scoring process, and the weighting for assessment criteria, etc. Always double check that you have uploaded the mandatory documents with your application. You can have someone read over your application as well, just to double check that you have everything in order. And if possible, combine your documents into one PDF, for example, CVs and MOUs. It just makes the assessment process just a little bit easier on our side. Important dates and deadlines. Again, 23rd of January at 5:30, you will need to have submitted your application on time. Just to note, within the last hour, especially from 4:30 to 5:30, the OLS system can get a little bit slow because so many people will be uploading at that time, and this can delay your application. So please just make sure you have it in on time. We hope to inform applicants by April 2025. The multidisciplinary arts team, so myself and Aideen, are available to answer questions, and we'll be available until the 20th of January, and we'll be available again from the 3rd of January. Or sorry, Friday the 20th of December is when we'll close up, and then we'll be back at the desk on the 3rd of January. So my contact details are there, 087 794 1044 if you want to contact me by phone, and then the multidisciplinary arts at artscouncil.ie email address is there as well. If you're having any technical difficulties with your OLS account, please contact them directly by the numbers on screen and online services at artscouncil.ie. I'm going to run through some FAQs before we jump into the chat, just to highlight any kind of questions that have come up a few times now. So can I make more than one application to the Touring of Work scheme? For example, to the same scheme, but different art form or art practice areas? The answer to this is no, you can only be the lead applicant on one application per scheme. However, you may apply with different applications to both Touring Round 2 and Advanced Planning, but only if the applications and proposals themselves are different. Our tour starts earlier than July 2025. Can I apply for the scheme? No, Round 2 of the scheme only funds tours that take place between July and December 2025. Advanced Planning 2026 only funds tours that take place between January and December 2026. Next question is there a minimum number of partners or venues required? There's no maximum, but the minimum is 3 venues. So you must go to at least 3 venues in the Republic of Ireland. Can we apply with a proposal for the same work that was previously unsuccessful? Yes, you can reapply for touring funding with the proposal that was previously unsuccessful. Can we remount a tour that has already taken place and was funded by the Arts Council? Yes, you can apply to cover the cost of remounting a production, exhibition, or show where these have not been funded by another source. So as we've outlined already, music, traditional arts, visual arts, and multidisciplinary arts are open to new programs of work, and you can include the production costs in your overall ask. Theatre, opera, dance, circus, street art, street performance, and spectacle will prioritise applications that have demonstrated they've been successfully produced before and they've gone on tour before as well. And they've been successful in terms of critical and audience response. Finally, can we apply for touring funding if we're not based in the Republic of Ireland? You won't be eligible if you are not based in the Republic of Ireland or you're not resident, but we will consider your application if you can convince us that the proposal benefits the arts in the Republic of Ireland. So there's a little bit of a caveat to that one. Can we apply for funding for a tour that will take place in Northern Ireland? No, you cannot apply for costs directly related to the touring of work in Northern Ireland. You can apply maybe under the Arts Council of Northern Ireland in relation to this type of activity. Can we apply for funding for a tour that takes place internationally? No, you might want to contact Culture Ireland for any tours taking place abroad. Will there be another round of touring funding announced for 2026, 2027? Yes, so these are a few of the rounds that will be upcoming. Touring 2026 round 1 will open on the 8th of April and close on the 8th of May 2025. Touring for round 2 in 2026 will open 9th of December 2025 and close 22nd of January 2026. And if you're proposing something that tours in 2027, we will have advanced planning that opens on the 9th of December 2025 and closes the 22nd of January 2026. Further information can be found on the Arts Council website under the Funding Opportunities schedule. So the final question is, we are an organisation in receipt of Strategic Partnership Arts Centre funding. Can we apply for touring funding? You can't apply for touring funding if you are applying for 2025 round two, but we are open to those in receipt of that funding to apply for 2026 advanced planning. And that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to end the recording now and we're going to open up the floor. You can type in your questions into the chat box and the FAQ box, and we will start to answer those questions.